What would you do if a stranger in a fake uniform slapped your wife in broad daylight? For Jack Donnelly, a retired Navy SEAL, the answer was simple: fight back. The sound of that slap carried farther than it should have. Neighbors' watering lawns froze. Kids let their bikes clatter to the pavement. Even a passing car seemed to pause. Trevor Langley, dressed in a fake HOA uniform, stood smug over Hannah Donnelly, who held her cheek in shock. She had done nothing more than trim her rose bushes, yet Trevor struck her, not realizing her husband stood only steps away. Jack's body went cold, not from fear, but from the kind of clarity that comes when battle instincts take over. He had been through ambushes, firefights, and rescues, but nothing compared to the fury of seeing a stranger lay hands on his wife. "Did you just hit my wife?" Jack's voice rang out sharp as steel. Trevor twitched a laugh, glancing back at the two men flanking him in cheap uniforms with plastic badges. She was out of line. "Someone's got to enforce the rules." Jack stepped forward. "Enforce? You think that's enforcement?" Hannah, voice trembling but steady, whispered for Jack to be careful. Trevor mistook her words as fear. "We run this neighborhood," he sneered. Jack tilted his head, lips curling into something like a smile. "Consequences? You're about to learn what that means." Then he moved, fast, efficient, relentless. Trevor's arm was twisted behind his back, his knees buckling. One of his men charged, only to be dropped by a crushing kick to the chest. The other swung clumsily. Jack sidestepped, yanked his arm down, and slammed him to the ground. Gasps broke across the gathering crowd. For months, these so-called enforcers had bullied the street, but now someone stood up. Jack pressed Trevor into the dirt, his words measured. "You're finished. You're never touching her or anyone again." The other two scrambled up, humiliated, ready to run. Jack's glare froze them. Across the street, a teenager whispered into his phone, recording everything. The neighborhood had just shifted. Hannah, though shaken, stood tall, pride mixing with relief. She had seen this side of Jack before, but never on their own lawn. The sound of sirens grew closer. Someone had called the real police. Blue and red lights flashed against the houses as the impostors squirmed in place. Jack leaned close to Trevor. "You better pray those sirens are for you, because if they're not, I'm not finished." This fight hadn't started in a single afternoon. When Jack and Hannah moved to Round Rock from Plano, they wanted peace after Jack's 20 years of service. Their house was modest, charming, with a porch swing where Hannah took her tea. At first, the neighborhood seemed perfect, until Jack spotted 3 men in navy polos with HOA security stitched across the chest. They looked wrong. Posture too stiff, eyes too aggressive, gear clipped to their belts. They weren't volunteers. They weren't professionals. They were imposters. When Hannah returned from the mailbox days later, Trevor stopped her and claimed her paint was peeling, calling it a violation. The real HOA later confirmed to Jack they had no security team at all. Neighbors soon whispered their own stories. Threats over curtains, decorations, kids playing basketball. Fake citations taped to mailboxes. Everyone felt it, but no one pushed back. Until Jack. He confronted Trevor one hot afternoon, asking why he claimed authority. Trevor smirked. "We're the ones keeping order." Jack's voice stayed calm. "Cheap uniforms don't make you law. You put your hands on one more neighbor and you'll wish you hadn't." Trevor leaned closer. "Careful, Donnelly. When your wife breaks the rules, we'll see how tough you are." Jack walked away, but he carried those words like a live fuse. Hannah's fear deepened, sensing how far Trevor was willing to go. Soon the imposters escalated, leaving fake warning slips, lurking outside fences, circling like predators. Neighbors divided, some quietly thanking Jack, others avoiding eye contact, too afraid. Carla Park, a neighbor, whispered that Trevor planned to make an example of someone soon. Jack's resolve hardened. Bullies had power only when good people stayed silent. He knew the day would come when they went too far, and when it did, he was ready. That day arrived on his own lawn, with a single slap that echoed louder than any gunfire he'd heard overseas. And in that instant, the quiet street of Round Rock, Texas, would never be the same. Carla hesitated before nodding. He mentioned Hannah. Jack felt the air leave his lungs in a slow, controlled breath. "Thank you, Carla. I'll take it from here." That night, while Hannah slept, Jack sat in the dark living room staring out at the street. Every sound, car doors, barking dogs, footsteps, set his instincts on edge. He whispered to himself, "If he lays a finger on her, I won't hold back." But Trevor wasn't going to wait long. Saturday afternoon carried a strange heaviness in the Texas heat. Hannah, restless, slipped on her wide-brimmed hat and gloves and went out to trim the roses along the front walk. Gardening calmed her, gave her the peace she needed. She was clipping carefully when a shadow stretched across the grass. Trevor Langley stood too close, clipboard tucked under his arm like a badge, with two of his so-called officers waiting by the sidewalk. "Afternoon, Mrs. Donnelly," Trevor drawled. "Looks like we've got a problem here." Hannah straightened slowly, brushing dirt from her gloves. "What kind of problem?" Trevor tapped his clipboard. "Regulation 12C. No landscaping that obstructs a walkway. Your roses are creeping too far out. Someone could get scratched." Hannah's eyebrow arched. "Those roses have been here since we moved in. No one's complained. And the HOA doesn't send men like you door to door." Trevor's smile was thin. "Times change. We're cracking down. Fix it by tomorrow or there's a fine." She crossed her arms. "You don't scare me."
"I called the HOA myself."
"They said you're not official. You're pretending." The smirk slid off his face. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're brave, huh? Maybe your husband filled your head with Navy toughness, but you're not him." Her pulse raced, but her tone stayed firm. "And you're not security. You're a bully in a polo shirt." For a beat, he just stared, jaw twitching, anger radiating off him. Then, quick and ugly, his hand cracked across her cheek. The sound was sharp, louder than the cicadas. Mrs. Reynolds dropped her hose. Carla froze on her porch. Neighbors gasped. The slap was more than physical. It was meant to humiliate. Hannah staggered, hand to her cheek, pain burning, but her voice trembled with fury. "You'll regret that." And then came the voice that cut through everything. "Did you just hit my wife?" Jack had been on the porch the whole time, arms folded, letting Hannah hold her ground. But when Trevor struck her, he stepped forward, deliberate, eyes locked on the man. Trevor forced a laugh. She was out of line. Somebody had to check her. Jack's voice was steady. "Somebody? You just made the biggest mistake of your life." His men shifted uneasily. One whispered, "Trevor, maybe we should back off." "Shut up," Trevor snapped, his voice cracking. Jack moved closer until only inches separated them. "Apologize right now or you'll never touch anyone again." Trevor sneered. "You think you scare me, soldier boy? You're retired. You're nothing." That broke the last restraint. Jack's fist smashed into Trevor's jaw, dropping him hard. The first officer lunged, but Jack twisted his arm and flipped him onto the grass. The second swung wildly, only to take an elbow to the chest that sent him sprawling. Neighbors gasped, some whispering cheers. Trevor groaned on the pavement, blood on his chin. "You think this is over?" Jack leaned down, voice low and cold. "It's over when I say it's over." Sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder. The street filled with murmurs, phones recording, neighbors spilling from their houses. Hannah pressed her hand to her cheek and walked to Jack, touching his arm. The heat in him softened instantly. She whispered, "I'm okay. You did what you had to do." Jack kissed her forehead and turned back just as police cruisers screeched up. Deputies stepped out, scanning the scene. 3 impostors battered, neighbors gathered, Jack standing tall. "What happened here?" Officer Ramirez demanded. Carla's voice rang out before anyone else could speak. He slapped her. "We all saw it. And they've been harassing us for months." Mr. Chen shouted. "They came after me and my wife with fake fines." Mrs. Reynolds added, "They threatened me over curtains." The deputies frisked the men, pulling fake IDs and knockoff badges from their pockets. One shook his head. Bogus. Not even close to real. The imposters were shoved into cruisers as neighbors buzzed with overlapping stories. Threats, fake citations, intimidation. Jack stood silently until Ramirez turned to him. "Sir, is it true?" Jack nodded. "He struck my wife while she trimmed the roses. I stepped in." Hannah raised her voice, cheeks red but steady. "He hit me in front of everyone." Ramirez's jaw tightened. The deputies cuffed the men. Trevor shouted through the car door as it slammed. "This isn't over." Jack didn't even flinch. He just wrapped an arm around Hannah while the sirens faded down the street. The neighbors didn't scatter. They lingered, murmuring, anger spilling into the open. Carla approached, eyes burning. "You did what we were too scared to do." "I don't know how to thank you." Jack shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just don't stay quiet anymore." Mr. Chen admitted paying fake fines. Mrs. Reynolds confessed giving in out of fear. Story after story poured out until Jack finally said, "You all knew something was wrong, but silence gave them power. One man can be ignored. A neighborhood standing together can't. Hannah's voice rose fierce despite the sting on her cheek. When he hit me, he wanted me small. But I wasn't, because I knew Jack was there, and because none of us should live in fear. If you let people like Trevor run things, they'll take until there's nothing left. Margaret Reynolds stepped forward, cane in hand. She's right. This is our home. I'll be damned if I let 3 punks in fake uniforms tell me how to live. For the first time, the fear seemed to lift. Jack looked out at the gathering. They're gone for now, but don't think they won't try something else. The police can handle charges. The real fight is making sure nobody like them ever thinks this neighborhood is easy prey again. Carla said, Then it's time we meet. Not the HOA board, us. The people who live here. Mr. Chen offered his garage. The neighbors nodded, voices rising in agreement. Later, porch lights glowed, shadows stretching long. Sergeant Anderson returned with Deputy Ward. We ran their IDs, Anderson said. Trevor Langley's got priors, fraud, intimidation, even an old assault charge. He's been running this scam in neighborhoods for years. Uniforms bought online, fake badges, fake fines, it's a racket. Hannah's stomach turned. So he's done this before? Ward nodded. Different city, same playbook. Jack's jaw set. Well, this time it ends here. Jack listened as the officers explained Trevor's racket. Fake HOA rules, bogus fines, intimidation. Most people just complied because they saw a badge and clipboard. Carla asked if Trevor would just walk free in a few weeks. Ward shook her head. Not this time. With Hannah's assault, witness statements, and videos, the charges would stick. Impersonating an officer, harassment, assault, maybe even extortion. Relief washed through the group, but Jack pressed about the stolen money. Anderson admitted it depended on the investigation, but testimony would help. Hannah's voice carried heavier than Jack's. She said Trevor's look made her feel like nothing, and the neighbors murmured in painful recognition. Ward told Jack he handled himself well, but warned him to let the police take over next time. Jack's reply was sharp. Maybe next time they'd arrive before his wife was hit. The officers didn't argue. When they left, Margaret Reynolds spoke first. She admitted she felt foolish for mistaking fraud for stricter HOA rules. Jack told her the shame wasn't hers. Predators hide behind authority. Margaret straightened, steadier than before. Tom Alvarez muttered, "What if they make bail?" Jack's answer was firm. "Then we stay vigilant. They can't hide in plain sight anymore." The crowd buzzed with a new kind of energy. Hannah squeezed Jack's hand as they finally went inside. She joked softly about roses and pruning shears leading to police cruisers. Jack told her life tests us where we least expect it, but tonight proved the street wasn't powerless. 2 days later, the Chen family's garage was packed. Folding chairs, kids perched on bikes, neighbors shoulder to shoulder. Carla admitted they all let things slide because it was easier. But Hannah got slapped in her own yard, and it could have gone further if Jack hadn't stepped in. Hannah sat quietly, Jack's hand steadying hers. Mrs. Reynolds confessed she'd paid money out of fear. Jack told them none should feel ashamed, they were targeted. Fear wins when people stay silent. Hannah added that Trevor's slap humiliated her, but looking at her neighbors reminded her this wasn't just about her. Margaret stood tall on her cane, saying 30 years in this neighborhood wasn't ending because of imposters. Carla asked what now. They agreed they needed to watch for each other, speak up, and stand together. Tom still doubted. What if someone else like Trevor showed up? Jack said then, 30 neighbors standing together would be enough to stop it before it began. The meeting turned to planning. They exchanged numbers, set up a group chat, even organized evening walks. Laughter broke through when Mr. Chen joked he'd send anyone trying to find him straight to Jack. Jack ended the night reminding them they didn't need badges to protect their street, just courage and unity. The room filled with applause. In the weeks that followed, the street changed. Kids played outside again, neighbors greeted one another warmly, and the group chat buzzed with lost dogs, bake sales, and small updates. Trevor and his crew faced real charges, their scheme exposed in the local paper. Jack downplayed his role, telling reporters it wasn't just him, it was all of them. One evening, Hannah paused by her roses, saying she'd remember not the slap but what came after. Jack told her pain doesn't get the last word, strength does. In Round Rock, people didn't just talk about the fight anymore. They remembered how one family's defiance turned fear into unity. For Jack and Hannah, the lesson was clear. Peace isn't passive. It's defended every day, sometimes on the quietest streets. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's refusing to let fear decide how you live.